Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we will be talking about posting and preparation of Tshape account. Students, we already know that a recording process involves 4 steps: analyze, record, post and prepare. So far, we have discussed analyze and record. In analyze, we prepare accounting equation. Then we record the transactions in the book of prime entry or original entry, which is journal. After recording the transactions in a chronological order in journal, we transfer these entries to another account which is called ledger. All these entries, all these transactions are transferred from journal to ledger. This process is called posting. Posting means transferring of transactions or entries from journal to different accounts in ledger. So this is the step posting, which we are going to discuss now. In ledger, we prepare different accounts and each account has two sides, debit side and credit side. Now students, T-shape account is the example, is the illustrative way of preparation of accounts. It is not the actual ledger, but it is just an illustration of how the amounts are shown in an account. Let's start with an example. These are some of the journal entries which have been passed. Now we have to post these journal to ledger. Okay, for that purpose, we know that we prepare an account which is called T-shape account, and this is the format of T-shape account. On the top of the account, we write the title of the account, like the head, for example, name of the assets, name of the liabilities, or revenues or expenses, like furniture account, equipment account, creditors account, accounts receivables, etc. On the left side, we have all the debits, and on the right side, we write all the credits. Left side records all the debits and right side records all the credits. So we make account for each head present in the journal entries. Okay. Now there is a format in which these accounts are prepared, that is called chart of accounts. These chart of accounts are prepared in a format which is, first of all, we record all the assets. All the assets are recorded first, and then after recording the assets, we record all the liabilities. After recording the liabilities, we record shareholders' equity. Then comes your revenue and finally comes expenses. So the sequence is, first of all, we record all the assets, then we record all the liabilities, then comes shareholders' equity, revenues and expenses. This is the sequence which has to be kept in mind while preparing the chart of accounts. Okay. Now let's start with this preparation. We have a furniture account, cash account. So we are making this sheet here. We are making one cash account. We have one heading furniture. So we are making one furniture account. Then the other heading is salary expenses. Again cash. Supplies accounts payable. So you can see here. Now how this posting is done. See, very simple. In this account, if we are making furniture account, if this furniture is debit, it has a debit balance, we write it on the debit side of that account. Here in this, furniture is showing debit balance of 5,000. So in this furniture account, we will show this amount here as 5,000 and we will write the date. Since we are not given the date, we are writing number 1 since it's a first transaction. Otherwise, you would have written date here and then you would write the amount. We just mention date. If it is not mentioned, we mention the serial number. Then we mention the amount with which the account has been debited or credited. So on the debit side, that means on the left side of furniture account, we are writing 5,000. Then cash. In the same transaction, cash is credited with 5,000. So when we'll be preparing cash account, we will be writing it on the credit side 5,000 and the date here which is not given, so we'll be writing 1 as in the date. Okay. Next comes salary. Salary is debited with 3,000. The salary expenses account, under the salary expenses account, we will debit it with 3,000 here, and this transaction is transaction number 2, so we'll write it here. In the same transaction, cash is again credited with 3,000, so we will credit cash in second transaction with 3,000. Remember, if the this date is mentioned, you will be writing the date here instead of the number, serial number. Next, supplies to accounts payable. Supplies debit 2,000, accounts payable credit 2,000, accounts payable credit 2,000. The transaction is third. And supplies. Supplies debit 2,000, transaction number 3. Okay. Next, cash to common shares 15,000. Cash to common shares. Common shares is credited 15,000 in transaction number 4. Here 15,000 is debited with transaction number 4. Dividends to cash. Dividends debit with 500, sorry. Dividends debit with 500. This is fifth transaction, so I have written fifth. And to cash. Cash is going out, so transaction number 5 with 500, the cash is being reduced. Next, accounts receivable to service revenue 5,000. Accounts receivable is increased, is debited with 5,000. Transaction number 6 to service revenue. So here in transaction number 6, service revenue is credited with 5,000. Okay. Next is rent expense to cash 800. Rent expense has a debit balance here of 800 in transaction number 7, and to cash. Cash has a credit balance of 800 in transaction number 7. Accounts payable to cash 1,200. Accounts payable has a debit balance of 1,200 in transaction number 8. To cash. Cash again has a credit balance of 1,200 in transaction number 8. Cash to accounts receivable 3,000. Cash debit balance 3,000. Transaction number 9. Accounts receivable in the transaction 9, it is 3,000, which is reduced. Prepaid insurance to cash 1,500. Prepaid insurance is your asset. In transaction number 10, prepaid insurance amount 1,500. Debit to cash. In transaction number 10, to cash 1,500. Now we have prepared all the accounts and we have written all the details that have been mentioned in the journal. So this is called posting. Posting is done from journal to these T-shaped accounts or ledger accounts. These are not proper ledger accounts. These are not the format in which ledger accounts are prepared. But this is an example. This is a way of illustrating an account. So it is called T-shaped account, where we only mention the amounts and the date. Here we are having serial number, so we're writing serial number instead of date. Now the most important thing that has to be kept in mind is after preparation of these accounts, we have to write the balance. Balance as in which side has greater balance. At that side we show the amount. Like here we say in this cash account, the debit balance is 15 plus 3, 18,000. And this credit balance, if we just calculate this, this is coming out to be 12,000. The total of this is 12,000 and the total of this is 18,000. So we know that debit side is greater, the left side is greater by how much? By 6,000. This cash is greater. So we will write this balance on the credit side, and here we will write the closing balance as whatever the date is given, you will write that date here. If it is 31st July, you will write 31st July. If 31st December, you will write 31st December, and so on. So the date you will mention here, and you will mention the amount by which it is greater. You do not write the amount here on the side which has less balance. You will write it on the side which has greater amount. Or you could remember it in another way. Like we all know that the rules of debit and credit, right? Assets, increase in asset is debited and increase in expense is debited. We know that. We also know that normal balance for all the assets is debit and normal balance for all the expenses is also debit. So you have to remember here in this case that you will find that in case of all the assets, the balance will be always on the debit side. The remaining balance will always be on the debit side. And for all the liabilities and the expense and the revenues, the balance will be on the credit side. Okay, see, accounts receivable, here also you will see that this side, this debit side is greater by how much amount? 2000. So you will write 2000 here and you will write the date as in closing balance I'm writing, but you can write the date 31st December or whatever the question is telling you. Now prepaid insurance, we do not have to write closing balance here. It's because you're not having any balance on the credit side, so it is assumed that this is the closing balance 1500 on the debit side. Why? Because this is an asset. Assets always normally have debit balance. Supplies again is your asset, so it has debit balance of 2000. It has nothing on the credit side, which means that it has debit balance of 2000. Furniture also has debit balance of 5000. Here we are not supposed to write the closing balance. If the question asks you to write it, you can write it. Now here accounts payable, it's a liability. We know that liabilities usually have credit normal balance, right? So you will find here that on the credit side, the balance is coming on the credit side. See, 2000, credit side is greater than debit side. Yes, by how much? 800. So you will write this balance here on the credit side and you will write the date of the closing balance. Fine. Common shares also normally have credit balance. So you can see here 15,000 is coming out to be your credit balance. See, we are not writing this closing balance here because we are not given any amount on the other side. But if the question asks you to write, you can write it like this. Okay. Dividends have debit balance normally, so it is showing you the debit balance. Salary expense. Expenses have debit balance because increase in expenses are always debited. So we know that normal balance for expenses is also debit. So you will find it here. Debit balance for salaries expense, debit balance for rent expense. Revenues have normally credit balance. So you find it here that in this account it is having a credit balance. Okay, see, we have to write this thing we do when we have balances on both the sides or we have more than one transaction. Okay, in these cases there is only one single transaction which are covered, so there is no need to write any closing balance. Fine, but still if the question asks you, you can write the closing balance. This is all for today. See you with the next video on preparation of trial balance. Till then, practice more and more questions on the normal balances and the rules of debit and credit and preparation of T-shape accounts.